Hello, welcome to the season of Scorpio. This is your host, the Buddha of the Basin, coming to you from Caring Crow, just outside of Lafayette, Louisiana, the heart of Acadiana. Now, in this season of Scorpio, we are going through a death and rebirth. This is always the case with the action of the fixed water sign Scorpio, bringing us through the waters, just as we are born from the waters. We are baptized in the waters. Now, this death and rebirth for the individual has to do with clinging to the truth at all cost and letting go of the devious webs of inner self-deception that have corrupted our psyche and disconnected us from our souls. Our souls, of course, are perfect, made in the image of a loving and just Father, Mother, God, creation as a whole. And that wholeness is still whole inside of you. However, that is the deepest layer of your reality. And you and I have constructed webs on top of this, webs that help us to move our muscle fibers and the nerve strands of conscious connection and co-creation within the human body. We have to truly become still and quiet, physically, mentally, emotionally, to even connect so-called spiritual energies and forces within our beings. Otherwise, we are simply in a state of illusion that we must disabuse ourselves from and disillusion ourselves, because only with the top of the head re-anchoring to the so-called 8th and 9th chakra points above the head can we truly regain that connection to what might be called the higher self. And so until your spine is as straight as mine is right now, you cannot argue you have the connection. It's physically just not possible. You are in a state of illusion. However, radical honesty will promote your authentic connection to occur as your subconscious and higher selves can communicate through this bridge of radical honesty. And so if we're truly being honest with ourselves, we need to recognize two things as a human race to go through this death and rebirth together as a planetary consciousness, not just the human individual. Those two things are, one, the actuality or the historicity. I hate that word. Obviously, you can stay connected. The actuality and historicity of Jesus Christ, better known as Emmanuel. Okay, that's point one. Apart from all the religious implications, which we can dive into over subsequent discussions, just the historicity, the actuality, based upon the authenticity of a relic. I have a tough time saying reliquary box, a bone box of James the Just, James the brother of Jesus. This burn box was discovered in Israel in the 70s, was purchased by a gentleman, and it wasn't until the 90s he even realized what he had. And he was taken to court, and it was determined to be authentic. So, I mean, I'm giving you such a horrible anecdotal version of the story, but it's not hard to Google the bone box of James, the brother of Jesus, because the claim was that it was the ending inscription that was added. Nobody doubted the authenticity of the box and of the inscription, except they argued that somebody had added the brother of Yeshua on there, because it was James, son of Joseph, brother of Yeshua. and they at first couldn't find another case where the brother was mentioned. He was somebody's brother, but they did find another example of the individual who provided all the incense and animal sacrifices to the temple. I forget the name, but there is authenticity to this inscription. 2,000 years ago, somebody wrote, "Here is James, son of Joseph, brother of Yeshua." Okay, so that's a fact. It hasn't been reported because once the governmental witnesses at first were trying to argue it was fake and a hoax, but on the stand in cross-examination, they acknowledged it wasn't their field, and they really couldn't truly argue that it was inauthentic. And then it was broken slightly in transportation. And so when the experts had to repiece it back together, they found that indeed somebody had tried to airbrush the inscription, the brother of Yeshua part, to make it look newer. All they had really done is clean it up good, so it looked newer and fresher by comparison. But even still, they were able to find evidence that suggested the dating of this material is 2,000 years old. So Jesus lives. Jesus lived. Get over it. That's number one. Take the information. Let your own psyche and spirit and soul guide you as to what to do with this information. If you feel compelled, go look the story up. Um, the individual purchased this thing in the 70s, and a Frenchman in the 90s told him what he had by translating it. He didn't know what he had. He bought this from an antique dealer because around the 70s, these wonderful sites were being discovered, but some unscrupulous people were getting into there and were taking artifacts. The whole Talmud of Emmanuel is discovered around I want to say early 64 or so, where the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea actually was. And unfortunately, the priest Isha Rashid and his whole family die in an Iraqi civilian camp before they can get home with these tablets. But the translation does make it to Albert Billy Meyer. So we do, and that story tells a different version of Jesus, Emmanuel, than what we have. But the authenticity, the historicity of Emmanuel needs to be acknowledged. That will do wonders for the world, just to say, yes, that here's not just these words of Josephus, but an actual bone box, some physical evidence that can tell us this man existed. You don't carve this you just don't do this. So that's number one. It does it again, for leaving aside religious implications, just sitting with the historicity, the actuality of Jesus, is a very comforting thing. And number two is the actuality, the existence of extraterrestrials, of aliens. That's in a way, both science and religion are going to be broken open for the public scrutiny. We're going to be able to claim these topics we are claiming these, and we have, of course, claimed these as our own. And it's a free for all. Time to tear down the goalpost, if you will. Time for the fans to rush the field in triumphant celebration. And whether the authorities, if you will, academic authorities, like this or not, it was the same thing I just found out with sort of Sherlock Holmes, how the fans started writing their own fan fiction of Sherlock Holmes. It wasn't just Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's property. At a certain point, it becomes all of our property. So these stories are likewise all of our property, whether they are fictional and non-fictional. And I now demonstrate, the authenticity of the testimony of people who submitted themselves for questions and analysis by Dr. Johnny Mack from Harvard, the psychiatrist. All these individuals were found to be credible. And so you can go back to the 50s, and Betty and Barney Hill were found to be credible, and were deeply disturbed by the missing time, and were deeply disturbed by the fact that Barney had his sperm taken. That was a deeply disturbing thing. They were not looking to make money. They weren't. The state of mind of these people were honest and were confused and psychologically troubled. So that's why we have to come to a place of wholeness about this, because it's like a rape of the mind. And in some ways it feels like an actual rape because what's happening is our genetics are being extracted by these beings in many cases, due to some deal they made with the Eisenhower or Truman administration, of shadow government, if you will, the Majestic 12. It sounds unreal and ridiculous, but that's the whole point. It's because of that unreal ridiculousness feeling you have in your guts about this. The human race hasn't found wholeness, because it's deeply troubling, because these figures are like trickster figures. They come out in the night, come through walls, abduct you from your bedroom, bring you onto a ship, and then bring you back, and you have no idea how you've been, number one, teleported, but then, if you will, you've been artificially inseminated, and then the child, as a young fetus, is extracted from you before. It's just an impossible story to believe, and yet the cold calculus suggests these beings are interested in creating a hybrid race with us, in hybridizing with us. And this is just one race. Clearly, this is just the material that is most psychologically disturbing for the human race. So much that Cartman has to, that South Park makes fun of the whole thing with the giant satellite anal probe thing, Cartman, because it's just too psychologically troubling. Nordic bearded beings appearing to Billy Meyer from the Pleiades are, on the other hand, much more comforting, and it's almost like the elves joining the humans in the Battle of the Two Towers. It's a huge, comforting realization. But you can't have one without the other, because whether we like it or not, the X-Files is burrowed inside of. We all have our own internalized X-Files. And that's what Scorpio is doing. Scorpio is forcing us to open that X-Files. This information that resonates with that lower orange band of the sacral chakra, going almost down to the root chakra. I mean, things that are buried very, very deep, things that you don't often think about, things that only will come out on the full moon, if you will, to come to the light. Things that require this loving maternal energy to even negotiate to the surface of your mind. But once you get them there, you can find these things just need to be loved and forgiven inside of you and me, because that's a whole different thing than the factual necessity of recognizing the authenticity of Jesus, because understanding that Jesus lives helps you understand you will live, and that you won't really die. And understanding that these aliens, nobody can really take from you the capacity for you to die, or for you to live. They can't take away that capacity. There's a lot of information about people don't go into the light. They want your souls and all that. I don't concern myself with any of that. Everything I've read from the raw material, other places, it's, you have friends waiting for you, and you definitely have. There are definitely higher forces that make sure that our souls are free to go where they fit, to go back to their soul families. That's not a concern. What's a concern is getting out of the ignorance while we're here on the earth. And the alien topic and the Jesus topic are just topics that would, once acknowledged, they help to liberate your whole psyche, because they remain out there but disconnected for most people. What do we do about Jesus? You went to church as a kid, but you don't believe he's actually God, and now they're telling you it's not a fact he existed. Well, it is a fact he existed. It's further a fact that there are gospels that say when he was a kid, he had the power to bless and curse. And between the ages of 3, 5 or so, school age kid, he would curse other children and their arms would wither away. And schoolmasters who whipped him, their arms would wither away. And other schoolmasters realized, no, this child knows much more than me. He would ask the master, why is the A written this way? They couldn't explain it. He could explain. He would know the alphabet, and he would know reasons behind the structure of the letter A. So he was a deep and a profoundly intelligent and wise child, and yet he also had a certain impetuousness. Like I was asking my wife what the proper word was, impetuosity. He would bless or curse, and they came to the realization whatever he said came to be. Once a child had fallen off a roof and died, and they wished to accuse Jesus, and he said, "Okay." He called up the boy out of the grave. He called him back to his body, and the boy said, "No, it wasn't Jesus who pushed me." Okay, that's all in this infancy gospel of Thomas. And the Quran makes this last story a part of the Quran. Gabriel brings us up to Muhammad just to sort of echo that he makes these sparrows out of clay. And when another boy comes and tells him, because it's like the Sabbath, you shouldn't make or do anything, he commands the sparrows to take flight, and they do. They come to life. So Jesus always loved the sparrows. And that's in the Holy Quran. Except that in the Quran, it suggests that he gets this power from Allah, and that's okay. We don't. I mean, it's a troubling realization that on the one hand you are God, and yet God is much more than you. Like a piece of God resides in you. That creative potential does reside in you, and Jesus had certainly a lot more because he was a higher being. Then he stepped into human incarnation, but he wasn't God, or one of the three. What He was a very wise being who had come here before in other incarnations, apparently as Joshua and as Joseph, the brother who was sold into slavery. And according to Edgar Casey, he was also Adam. So he was a being that had a huge karmic um, package with Israel, with that area. And as Jesus, he just gave it all up. He gave up the idea that he could be a king of these people. He knew that he could bring them what they needed, and they were so lost. But he also knew it wasn't meant to be. And he actually goes to Kashmir after the crucifixion, after he appears to die and comes back. He goes to Kashmir and he lives out his life there. And that's the story that people don't want to hear. They want to hear that he went to heaven and now we all get to go to heaven if we believe. And that's the fairy tale part. The reality is his wife was Mary Magdalene. She goes over to France with presumably at least a daughter named Sarah. And he goes with his mother over to India, and she dies in Pakistan, and he makes it to Kashmir. That's the best. And there's a grave for him at Kashmir, and they call him Yuza Asaf. And before you get to the little grave, there's 2 feet with holes where the nail, and the nails that you can see how his feet would have been put together, and a nail, and it's nailed to a cross. So, I mean, we don't know, but the story is a slightly different story. The actual story of Emmanuel versus what we've been told, that he was the Messiah, but he was rejected, and he had come to sort of pay a penalty for the Jewish people, because as Joshua, he had 5 kings crucified. If you know the story, they were hiding in the caves, and they go. I think they smoke them out. I forget they get. Oh no, they trap them in just the same way he's sort of trapped in a tomb, um, with the guards and the rock put over it. That's what they do. These kings hide in the caves, so they put rocks over the caves, and finally they let these kings out. When they surrender, then they're crucified. These 5 kings are crucified. So he's crucified as a king, as Emmanuel, because as Joshua, he had these 5 other kings crucified, and so that's his karma. And that's when he says it is done, it is finished. His karma is finished. He's on the tree, similar to Buddha, if you will, haven't paid, completing his character arc, if you will, the arc back to source. And again, that's what I led with. The arc back to source is opening those eighth and ninth chakra points, which I did at 15 when I took LSD. It's not like it. Unfortunately, if you don't know what you've done, it takes you quite a long time to understand what you've actually accomplished. And then it doesn't change any of the other growth that has to happen within the other seven chakras. Just because you've connected 7 to 8 and 9, you still have to connect 6 to 7. You know, so and yes, what holds a lot of people back is from opening this fifth chakra point is telling the truth and are knowing the truth. You see, you have to actually know the truth too to be set free. That's why I'm referring to the Nordic extraterrestrial good guys that came from Venus and the Pleiades, um, Alpha and Proxima Centauri. Then you have the Syrians, who are a slightly more mixed bag, mostly good. The Anunnaki, the Anak Empire from Sirius, and those dolphin beings, the Cetacean beings, the whales from Sirius. They're almost all allies, but they're part of the Anunnaki Empire, broke and connected with the Orion Greys, and there was a breakaway Tegetan, Pleiadian faction that also goes there, and he's from Aldebaran, and this is this group that sort of works with the Nazis. And so we have a negative extraterrestrial influence that comes into this planet. It's really it in the modern world around the teens, just as we get the Federal Reserve and World War One. So it's like this last 100 years has been this push of the negative extraterrestrials to create their totalitarian control grid for the planet, which was like going to be an AI digital prison thing, which it could have been what John the Revelator saw way back. It's unclear to me, but it lines up enough. The patent number 060606 from Microsoft. We don't have to fully go there. The billionaires want a digital surveillance grid. That's pretty obvious. But what's also obvious is that this is the time of the harvest, that this planet has a lot of souls on it in school. Like, it's been a second chance planet after Mars kind of failed, after this other third planet became the asteroid belt. There was like Earth was a second chance. So Earth was the last opportunity, if you will. Earth is like the David, like the runt, if you will, that becomes the place where all this plays out. And it's a very grand story. And for the human race to become whole, we have to understand we warred on Mars. There was war back in the constellation of Lyra. We were at war with this reptilian race initially, and then so there have been evil extraterrestrial races. They're in our psyche. We have Dracula as this old character. Somehow they wanted our blood. They could drain our life force energy from us. You see, that's the other troubling bit in our psyche, because while the Greys wanted our genetics and our DNA, this reptilian race wanted our actual blood and the life force energy that comes with making us afraid, as they extract our blood while we're afraid. So that's the sad truth of all of that adrenochrome business. There's no need to belabor that. If you already have all the other pieces to your temple built, that's just the last little piece. And if you don't, there's no need to build a temple there. That's a lot of people suffering. And if you haven't already gone down that road and figured things out, then it's a blessing. You don't have to. You don't have to think about those things in your day-to-day life. The raping and the suffering of children is not something fun to contemplate. But if you're meant to be one of the people who knows why, so you can heal whatever happened to you in your past lives on Earth, then good for you to figure it out, and good for you for coming to that place of healing, because that's what this is all about. Scorpio is just a gateway to healing, a gateway to letting go of what needs to be released. As the fixed water sign, it stores up and soaks up, and it's cued into negative energies. So it's guiding you to release all of those misqualified energies within yourself and what's been done to you and how you've absorbed it. And that's why these alien topics are important, because some were ruled over us as gods. Many did not. The good ones did never intended to be gods. They just wanted to be shepherds. So that was always seen as the model, the shepherd king, just guiding, helping us, in our innocent young state, right? And others were more like tyrants, and that's been that's within us psychologically. There's still the choice for how we're going to try to be in this world. Who are we going to emulate, as when we become parents? And it's best to fully acknowledge that we have all this within us psychologically, you know, because that's where healing comes from. Because once you acknowledge you have all of it inside of you, you're forgiving when you see it manifested in the actions of others. And that's it. That's what the wholeness looks like and what it feels like. It feels like a tremendous burden, and yet that anchor is what keeps you grounded. And being grounded means you don't rush to any judgment, you don't rush to anything. You're very anchored and secure in the deepest wholeness that you possess, which comes to you from the wise and loving creator. Om Shanti Om.